The coconuts have got the jobs. The race industry is a growth industry. We despairing, they careering. We want more peace, they want more police. The Uncle Toms are getting paid. The race industry is a growth industry. We say sisters and brothers don't fear. They will do anything for the mayor. The coconuts have got the jobs. The race industry is a growth industry. They're looking for victims and poets to rent. They represent me without my consent. The Uncle Toms are getting paid. The race industry is a growth industry. In suits they dither in fear of anarchy. They take our sufferings and earn a salary, steal our souls and make their documentaries, inform daily on our community. Without black suffering, they'd have no jobs. Without our dead, they'd have no office. Without our tears, they'd have no drink. If they stopped sucking, we would get justice. The coconuts are getting paid. Men, women, and Brixton are being betrayed. Assalamu alaikum. Today we're just going to go through a short lesson which will involve going through a poem. This poem is inspired by World Poetry Day, which happens once a year. And in schools, it's very important, especially in the UK, for children to learn about poetry. So I'm just going to go through a few ideas about poetry, and hopefully you'll be able to benefit from this. So yeah, first of all, what is World Poetry Day? So poetry reaffirms our common humanity by revealing to us that individuals everywhere in the world share the same questions and feelings. One of the main objectives of the day is to support linguistic diversity through poetic expression and to offer endangered languages the opportunity to be heard within their communities. So when we look at the word here, endangered, so what we try to do in Poetry Day is try to give attention to languages that are often overlooked in English. So, for example, we might look at some translated Spanish poems. We might look at poems from other cultures, such as from a Pakistani culture. And we try to look at poems from all different, or study poems from different backgrounds, so that the students get a personal connection to the poems. The observance of World Poetry Day is also meant to encourage a return to the oral tradition of poetry recitals to promote the teaching of poetry. So when we say oral tradition, we mean by the spoken traditions, because obviously poetry is something that is often recited, but in schools it is mainly analyzed and looked at from the perspective of just understanding it, looking at the language devices that are used within the poems. So we look at similes, metaphors, the imagery that is used, but we don't always emphasize the oral tradition. So how it is read, how it is recited, how it sounds when the poem is read, because obviously when we read a poem, it's meant to have a huge impact on us. It's meant to create a feeling or some sort of impact. UNESCO does not want poetry to be considered as an outdated form of art, but one which enables society as a whole to regain and assert its identity. So through Poetry Day, which is emphasized through UNESCO, which is a huge charity, it wants to make society get back in line with what poetry is, reaffirm its identity, so making it something that is fun, making it something that can easily be recited, memorized. So these are some of the ideas that are promoted through World Poetry Day, which we do celebrate in school. Okay, so in this brief video, I'm just going to go through one of the poems by a poet who grew up in South London. So I introduced the poet first of all. So this poet's name is Benjamin Zephaniah. So Benjamin Zephaniah is from South London, And South London is a part of London that has changed a lot over the last. It's constantly been changing. But if we go back about 20 to maybe even 30 years, South London was a dangerous part of London. There was a lot of crime. There's a lot of racism as well because there a lot of this area is filled, or a lot of people that live in this area are from Afro-Caribbean backgrounds. So they themselves or their parents have migrated to London, England, from places like Jamaica and the Caribbean, and a lot of the people in this area are from those types of backgrounds. Often, people from that background, because they've obviously come from another country and moved into this country, they've been they've experienced a lot of racism. They've been treated differently. They've been blamed for a lot of crimes within society. So Benjamin Zephaniah, when he writes his poems, he writes it based on his experiences in the UK, and he likes to touch upon issues such as racism, problems in society, how people are mistreated. So this poem, The Race Industry, is based on that. And when he starts off the poem, The Race Industry, um, it has connotations, or the word race has connotations of where someone has come from, their background. Industry makes us think about what it's like to go and work in a lot of places in the UK where the jobs or the types of jobs are often advertised for a certain set of people. He always feels in his writing that although the job applications are open for everyone to apply for, he thinks that companies have a certain person or a certain image of a person whom they want to recruit. So if you come from a certain background, or you haven't gone to a certain university, or you haven't maybe studied, or you even the way you speak, so these can all be disadvantages for someone getting a job in this industry. So this is what Benjamin Zephaniah touches upon. Okay, so we're just going to read the poem, and then we'll briefly go through some of the meanings. The coconuts have got the jobs. The race industry is a growth industry. We despairing, they careering. We want more peace, they want more police. The Uncle Toms are getting paid. The race industry is a growth industry. We say sisters and brothers don't fear. They will do anything for the mayor. The coconuts have got the jobs. The race industry is a growth industry. They're looking for victims and poets to rent. They represent me without my consent. The Uncle Toms are getting paid. The race industry is a growth industry. In suits they dither in fear of anarchy. They take our sufferings and earn a salary, steal our souls and make their documentaries, inform daily on our community. Without black suffering, they'd have no jobs. Without our dead, they'd have no office. Without our tears, they'd have no drink. If they stopped sucking, we would get justice. The coconuts are getting paid. Men, women, and Brixton are getting or are being betrayed. So, a poem with a very strong meaning. I'm just going to highlight some key points. So, when we say industry, um, so the definition of an industry is any large-scale business activity or a type of productive manufacture or trade. So sometimes we say the retail industry, the oil industry, the catering industry. Yeah, so it's all like huge areas where people might work in, or an area that dominates a sector. So when he says the coconuts have got the job, the race industry is a growth industry. We despairing, they careering. So coconuts sometimes can be um, in slang, it's sometimes referred to as a person who is far away from their roots and their identity based on their family traditions. So, um, in colloquial language, or even when people are speaking in English, if they say, "Oh, he's a coconut," it means he's someone who has tried so hard to fit in to the current society and the expectations of maybe being British that he's maybe left behind his true identity that his parents maybe followed. So that's coconuts. He says, we despairing, they careering. So despairing here, so being the verb, careering. So he's saying we. So when he's using the inclusive pronoun we, so it shows together, it shows unity. So the we, it makes him feel as though he is anxious, he's scared about his career prospects because he does not submit to what these coconuts submit to. And he's saying they're careering. So people are getting far because they have become what the industry wants them to become. So they have let go of whatever uniqueness or qualities that they've had within their within their identity. They've let some of this go in order to fit into a certain career. He says, we want more peace, they want more police. The Uncle Toms are getting paid. So Uncle Toms here, he's referring to a term that's used. It came about in America and is used as well in the UK. Uncle Tom is referred to as the white slave owner. So the owner of slave is owners, or the owner of a slave is referred to as an Uncle Tom. So he's saying the Uncle Tom here could be referring to the government, could be referring to people who are very senior in society, so high class members of society who might tend to be white and who are benefiting from their workers who aren't entirely white. Yeah. So he says the Uncle Toms are getting paid. When he says we want more peace, so he's trying to say that in society there's not enough peace. In South London, there's always an emphasis on there being more police. So when there's more police, they tend to stop and search people for no reason sometimes. They tend to pull over cars. I mean, this is a stereotype and this has happened. They tend to pull over people who are driving. So if a black man is driving a nice car, often the police might tell them to pull up. They might check their details, the car details, because they don't believe, although they won't say it, they don't believe that a black man should be driving a car of a certain value. He then says, we say sisters and brothers don't fear. They will do anything for the mayor. The coconuts have got the jobs. The race industry is a growth industry. They're looking for victims and poets to rent. They represent me without my consent. So when he says they're looking for victims and poets, so he's a poet himself, but they're looking for people like him to spread their propaganda, to spread their message, and to make it more appealing for people or to manipulate people. He says, in suits they dither in fear of anarchy. So the way that they're dressed often is in suits. Anarchy is often like chaos in problems. So he says they dither. So they're indecisive. They lurk in fear of anarchy. So they always try to control things. They might seem professional, well established, smart, but their intentions are are sometimes misleading. They take our sufferings and earn a salary. So this is a very strong line. Oh, mind my annotations. So when he says they take our suffering, so it goes back to the slave owners, the Uncle Toms. So the Uncle Toms would benefit from their slaves by making them work hard, often not paying them. So he's saying that people are suffering, people are working for a system, and they don't benefit as much as the person who's at the top of the system. He says they steal our souls and make their documentaries, inform daily on our community. So we get a sense of spying within the community. We get a sense of control. He says, without black suffering, they'd have no jobs. Without our dead, they'd have no office. So this can be going back to imperialism and when countries like England, Spain, when they occupied countries around the world, countries in Africa, could be in Asia as well, where they took the natural resources out of those places and then they benefited from that. There's also, if you go back to, if you look across history, when they went to islands and took a group of mass amounts of people, brought them to the UK and made them work. So Zephaniah could be touching upon um, these events that happened in the past. So purely just from this poem, we get a brief idea about um, Benjamin Zephaniah, the type of message that his poems carry. He's someone that is respected in society because of the way he articulates his words, the way he writes his poems. He's also written very powerful novels as well. And I'd encourage you to read them as they give a really good outlook on what life in London is like, especially for ethnic minorities. And he primarily speaks or writes about things based on his own experiences. So you get a real perspective on what life is like in a city in London, where we always see on TV or in the media how London is a glamorous place to live, it's full of money, it's full of opportunities. Yes, that's true, but he also gives us another perspective on what it's actually like living here and working here, and some of the struggles that people are going through today, and some of the struggles that people have gone through in the past. I hope you benefited from the lesson, and we'll end it here. Assalamu alaikum.